Hello, this is Klaus Jensen. Today I'm going to do a video which is quite different from my usual game analysis videos. Because in this video I will tell you the thoughts of my opponent rather than just my own thoughts on the game. What I did was that I posted a thread in the chess.com forums a few weeks ago asking for Class B opponents to play an unrated game with me in which they would share their thoughts throughout the game. And because I thought it would be interesting to make a few videos on the thought processes of players in the 1600 to 1800 range. And one of the applicants to play a game with me was the 20-year-old Sean from Toronto, Canada, who on chess.com is playing under the handle ultimifier. I don't know if Sean has an over-the-board rating, but he says that he scores just about 25% when he plays his father, who's a 1900 player nowadays. In his younger days, his father was almost 2100. So I think we can estimate that Sean is in the range 1600 to 1800 over the board. So what you're about to watch is ultimifier playing white and me, cludi, playing the black pieces. And the game starts e4, e5. And here Sean told me that he normally played the king's gambit, but his experience was that against good players he didn't get good results. The king's gambit is an extremely effective weapon against weaker players, but if black knows what he's doing, white will indeed have a hard time. So instead, ultimifier switched to a new opening for him, the Ruy Lopez, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5. Sean has seen Magnus Carlsen play this move, so it must be a very solid opening, as he says. And indeed, the Ruy Lopez is solid, but also very theoretical. a6, bishop a4, knight f6, castles, bishop e7, the closed Ruy Lopez, rook e1. I asked Sean if he had considered exchanging on c6, but he felt that, for example, bishop takes c6 here, d takes c6, would complicate things, which in general would lead to a better score for black, he said. I think bishop takes c6 is completely playable and simplifying rather than complicating the position after, for example, d3. But nevertheless, Sean played rook e1 and b5, bishop b3, castles, c3 and d5. And I decided to play the martial attack, on which I wrote an ebook which is still available as a free download on my blog. Sean here says that he wouldn't feel comfortable with the position after accepting the gambit e takes d5, knight takes d5, knight takes e5, knight takes e5 and rook takes e5 and c6. And indeed, the martial attack does offer good attacking prospects for black, especially against a class B player. So instead, Sean played d4 here, and after e takes d4, e5, Sean has chosen a line that is an excellent alternative to accepting the martial gambit, and I think it's a good piece of advice to do like Sean did in this game. If you have two available lines, choose the one that leads to the kind of position you feel most comfortable with. Knight e4, and Sean here considered taking the knight, knight takes d4, and expected knight takes d4 and c takes d4. But Sean felt that keeping the knights on the board would make my position more cramped because my knight on c6 is misplaced and blocking my c pawn. So instead he played c takes d4. I played bishop f5, and with knight c3, Sean wants to put pressure on d5. And he has nothing against the exchange of knights, as this would give him a nice central pawn chain. So knight takes c3, b takes c3. And well out of the opening we reach a critical point for almost all class B players. They have played the opening moves by memory or by logic or by database, but now they reach a position they don't really understand. They know practically nothing of the general plans for both sides, and knowing the plans and demands of a position comes from experience and from studies of master games. And this position has indeed been reached many times, even on Super GM level. And from these games we know that white's main plan is to try to exchange the dark squared bishops and then play for a kingside attack, while black's plan is to avoid the exchange of these dark squared bishops and to improve the position of this knight and then play for the c5 break. The knight would typically go to a5 and then c4. Could also be d8 and e6. So these are the general plans in this position. And when I played h6 in this position, I asked Sean what the purpose of this move might be. And Sean replied that he thought that it might be that I wanted to play g5 at some point, and also thereby preventing f4. But this shows, of course, a lack of understanding of the position, because what h6 does is that it prevents the normal bishop g5 from white, which is the move that would exchange the dark squared bishops. So what h6 does is that it prevents the normal development in this position, which could be something like queen d7, bishop g5, bishop takes, knight takes, knight a5, bishop c2, and knight c4, because this is offering white some chances of launching a kingside attack, while black will have to play on the queen side. But instead of taking on g5, the normal move in master games is to play bishop a3 to avoid this exchange of bishops. And then some games have even been drawn at this point. Bishop c1, again avoiding to exchange, going back to e7, and then bishop g5, and then a draw has been agreed on some occasions. But the h6 move is preventing this bishop g5. And in fact, this is a move that has never been played before, this h6, and this is one that I have suggested as a novelty in my Martial Attack ebook. h3 from Sean, he wanted to avoid bishop g4, knight a5, and now Sean comes up with a nice idea. He has thought about this possible exchange of dark squared bishops, and he reasoned this way. If I cannot play bishop g5, how can I then force an exchange of bishops? And he comes up with this nice idea, a4. Of course, planning bishop a3 and force the exchange of the dark squared bishops. And also deciding that he's prepared to give up his b3 bishop for my knight, no matter if it's an exchange on b3 or later on c4, if I decide to move my knight there. Rook b8, bishop a3, bishop takes a3, rook takes a3, knight c4. And now we have both reached some of our goals. Sean has exchanged his weak dark squared bishop for mine, and I have improved the position of my knight and my rook. Sean was unsure whether to trade off on c4 immediately or to move his rook, and he decided to move the rook primarily because he didn't like bishop takes c4, b takes c4, followed by c5, putting a lot of pressure on the white center. And I think Sean is right here. So he played rook a2 instead, and then came b4 to keep the a file closed and forcing an opening of the b file instead. And the b file is where my rook is placed, and I don't want to open the a file where Sean's rook is placed. And now the safest continuation would be not to allow me a pass pawn, and therefore Sean should have played c takes b4, rook takes b4, and bishop c2. But the game continued, bishop takes c4, and after d takes c4, c takes b4, rook takes b4, I now have this dangerous passed pawn. And after queen d2 and a5, the position is very difficult for Sean already. And if I had been playing Sean's position, I would probably have played rook c1 in this position. But after queen d5, black has very well coordinated pieces and strong pressure on the white position, and it's probably lost already for white. Sean played queen c3, and queen d5 came. And at this point of the game, Sean says that he's looking forward to seeing how I will convert the advantage of having a pass pawn into a win, because this is not something he experiences very often in his games. Again, rook c1, rook fb8, knight d2, applying some pressure on c4 is probably the best white can do, but then bishop d3, and still black has a very dominant position. But in the game came rook d1, rook f to b8, and now Sean played knight e1, planning knight c2 here, but leaving the defense of the d4 pawn, which was defended by the knight, now allows the superior coordination of my pieces to decide the game very quickly. Rook b3. And now we have an example of choosing the right move for the wrong reasons. Sean discarded queen c1 because it would limit the movement of his e1 rook. But in fact, queen c1 would lose a rook after rook b1, queen d2 and c3, because now the white queen is overworked. It cannot protect both rooks, so after, for example, queen e2, then queen takes a2, queen takes, and then rook falls on d1. So Sean chose the right move, is queen a1. But then I could play rook b1, rook takes and rook takes, queen has to go back to c3 and rook b3, queen c1, and now queen takes d4. The pawn is lost on d4. Of course he couldn't play queen a1, because then would follow rook b1 and then the knight would fall on e1. So queen takes d4, knight f3, queen c5. And Sean said that the only way he could see himself winning this game now was through some sort of a back rank mate, which is why he put his rook in the open d file. But then came rook b1, losing the queen, so Sean resigned here. I would like to thank Sean for playing the game and share many interesting thoughts throughout the game. And I think Sean plays very well. He seems to avoid blunders and has many good and logical considerations throughout the game. And he's currently rated just around 1800 on chess.com, and I'm sure that if he put the same effort into all his games as he did in this game, his rating would easily be almost 2000 on chess.com. And judging from only this game, it seems that to take his game even further, he would surely have to study the positions arising from his favorite openings to get a deeper understanding of the middle game plans for both sides. And I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you on my blog at clausjensen.com. Bye bye for now.